Terrell's voice was low and dangerous, his breath hot against her ear as he grabbed her chin roughly. "You think you can take my daughter away from me?" Simone tried to speak, to explain that she just needed space, but Terrell's grip tightened. "Listen to me real good," he whispered, his fingers digging into her jaw. "If I ever hear you speaking against me to anyone, your family, your friends, the courts, anyone, I will make sure both you and that little girl disappear. You understand me?" Terror froze the words in Simone's throat. She looked at Amara's frightened face and nodded slowly. "I want to hear you say it, Simone. Promise me you won't speak against me." But as Simone opened her mouth to respond, something inside her broke. The words wouldn't come. She couldn't promise him anything. She couldn't speak at all. That was 3 years ago. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to lose your voice, not because you can't speak but because you're too afraid to? Drop a comment below and let me know, would you stay silent to protect someone you love? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart. Now, at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, Simone Washington pushed her cleaning cart through the pristine halls of Preston Financial Tower. The 40-story building housed one of the most successful investment firms in Chicago, and Simone took pride in keeping every surface spotless. She moved with quiet efficiency, her steps muffled by the thick carpet. At 28, she had learned to make herself invisible, speaking only through small nods, gentle gestures, and the occasional note when absolutely necessary. The night supervisor, Mrs. Chin, had been patient with her during the interview process 3 years ago. When Simone handed her a note explaining that she was mute due to trauma, Mrs. Chin had simply nodded and said, "Actions speak louder than words anyway." Simone paused at the executive floor, pulling out her key card. The top floors were her favorite to clean because they stayed empty at night. No risk of awkward encounters or curious stares. Just her, the city lights, and the peaceful silence she had grown to appreciate. As she entered the first office, she noticed the nameplate, Jonathan Preston, CO. The office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. She had seen Mr. Preston a few times during shift changes, always impeccably dressed, always kind to the staff. She began dusting his mahogany desk, careful not to disturb the neat stacks of papers. A framed photo caught her attention, a handsome man in his early 30s with dark hair and kind eyes, holding a young boy who looked about 8 years old. The boy had the same eyes but seemed sad, almost lost. Simone felt a pang of recognition. She knew that look. Amara sometimes had the same expression when she thought her mother wasn't watching, the look of a child carrying worries too heavy for their small shoulders. Setting the photo back in its exact position, Simone continued her work. She found comfort in the routine. Dust, vacuum, empty trash, wipe surfaces. Each task completed brought her closer to going home to Amara, who would be sleeping peacefully in their small apartment across town. Their babysitter, 16-year-old Keisha from downstairs, was reliable and sweet. She never asked questions about why Simone never spoke, just accepted the notes and the extra $20 Simone always left as a thank you. Simone finished the executive floor and moved to the conference rooms. The building felt different at night, peaceful, almost protective. During the day, it buzzed with energy and ambition. At night, it belonged to people like her, the invisible ones who kept the world running while others slept. She thought about Amara as she worked, as she always did. Her daughter was thriving in preschool despite everything they had been through. The teachers appreciated Simone's written communications and never made her feel different during parent conferences. "Amara is such a bright little girl," her teacher had written in a note just last week. "She's very protective of other children and has a wonderful imagination. She talks about her mama being the strongest person in the world." The note had made Simone cry in the privacy of their apartment bathroom. If only Amara knew how weak her mother felt most days, how the silence had become both a prison and a shield. As she entered the last office of the night, Simone found herself wondering what it would be like to speak again. Sometimes, late at night, she would practice in the mirror, moving her lips around words that used to flow so easily. Her voice had once been her strength. She had been studying to become a teacher before everything changed. But Terrell's threat echoed in her mind whenever she was tempted to break her silence. He had made it clear that speaking could mean death for both her and Amara. So she stayed quiet, invisible, safe. Simone gathered her supplies and headed for the elevator. Another night's work complete, another day closer to the life she hoped to build for Amara. A life where her daughter would never have to choose between her voice and her safety. As the elevator descended, carrying her back to her world of whispered lullabies and silent bedtime stories, Simone couldn't have imagined that her carefully constructed life of silence was about to change forever. The man in the photo on the CEO's desk would soon notice the gentle woman who cleaned his office. And when he did, he would see something in her that even she had forgotten existed. But that discovery was still hours away, waiting in the space between one night and the next, between silence and sound, between fear and hope. Jonathan Preston rubbed his tired eyes as he reviewed the quarterly reports for the third time that evening. The numbers were good, better than good, actually, but his mind kept wandering to his son Blake, who was sprawled on the leather couch in the corner of his office, fast asleep clutching a tablet. At 8 years old, Blake had been through more custody battles and therapy sessions than any child should endure. His mother, Catherine, had remarried and moved to California, leaving Blake feeling abandoned and angry. The court-mandated custody arrangement meant Blake spent every other weekend and alternating holidays with Jonathan, but the boy remained distant and troubled. Jonathan glanced at his watch, 11:15 p.m. He should take Blake home to the penthouse, but these late nights at the office were often the only time they could spend together without the tension that seemed to follow them everywhere else. A soft sound in the hallway caught his attention. Through his open office door, he could see a woman pushing a cleaning cart, moving with such quiet grace that she seemed to float across the marble floor. He had noticed her before during his frequent late nights, always professional, always careful not to disturb anyone who might still be working. Jonathan found himself watching as she entered the office across from his. She moved with purpose but also with a gentleness that intrigued him. Most of the cleaning staff worked efficiently but hurriedly, eager to finish and go home. This woman seemed to take genuine care with each task. Blake stirred on the couch, mumbling something in his sleep. Jonathan walked over to check on him, noticing how peaceful his son looked when he wasn't struggling with his emotions. The custody evaluator had recommended more quality time and meaningful conversations, but those seemed impossible when Blake barely spoke to him. A few minutes later, the woman appeared in his doorway holding her supplies. She pointed to herself, then gestured toward the office, clearly asking permission to clean. Jonathan nodded and stood up. "Of course, please come in. I'm sorry we're still here so late." The woman smiled politely and began working around them, being extra quiet near where Blake was sleeping. Jonathan watched her dust his desk with careful attention, never disturbing his papers or moving things out of place. When she reached the family photo, she paused for just a moment, her expression softening as she looked at Blake's image. There was something almost motherly in her eyes, a recognition that surprised Jonathan. Blake suddenly jolted awake as he often did, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Dad? Where are we? Where's Mom?" "We're at the office, son. You fell asleep while I was working. Mom is in California, remember?" Blake's face crumpled with disappointment, and Jonathan felt the familiar stab of helplessness. No matter how many toys he bought or activities they did together, he couldn't fill the void Catherine had left. Blake began to cry, not the loud sobs of a tantrum, but the quiet, heartbroken tears that worried Jonathan most. "I want to go home. I want Mom." "I know, Blake. I know you do." Jonathan looked around, feeling lost. The woman had stopped cleaning and was watching Blake with genuine concern. She looked at Jonathan questioningly, as if asking permission to approach. Jonathan nodded, curious about what she intended to do. The woman set down her cleaning supplies and walked slowly toward Blake. She didn't try to speak to him or offer false comfort. Instead, she simply sat on the floor beside the couch, her presence calm and non-threatening. Blake looked at her through his tears, confused by this stranger who wasn't trying to fix him or tell him everything would be okay. The woman reached into her cart and pulled out a small packet of tissues, offering them to Blake with a gentle smile. He took them hesitantly, still sniffling. Then she did something that amazed Jonathan. She began making simple shadow puppets on the wall with her hands, using the desk lamp as a light source. A rabbit appeared first, then a bird, then what looked like a butterfly. Blake stopped crying, fascinated by the moving shadows. The woman made the rabbit hop across the wall, then had the bird fly in circles. She caught Blake's eyes and pointed to his hands, encouraging him to try. Blake wiped his nose and held up his hands, trying to copy her movements. His first attempt looked like a misshapen blob, but the woman clapped silently and nodded enthusiastically. She adjusted his fingers gently, helping him form a better shape. Within 10 minutes, Blake was laughing softly as he made his own shadow animals dance across the wall. The transformation was remarkable, from heartbroken child to engaged, curious boy. Jonathan watched in amazement. In 8 years of fatherhood, through countless therapy sessions and expert advice, no one had been able to connect with Blake so naturally and immediately. When Blake finally yawned, the woman stood up and began packing her supplies. She looked at Jonathan and mouthed good night, then headed toward the door. "Wait," Jonathan called softly, not wanting to wake Blake, who was already drifting back to sleep with a slight smile on his face. The woman turned back to him, eyebrows raised in question. "Thank you," Jonathan said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I've never seen him calm down so quickly. That was amazing." She smiled and gave a small nod, then gestured toward Blake and placed her hand over her heart, clearly indicating that she understood what it was like to care for a troubled child. Jonathan suddenly realized something. "You haven't said a word this whole time. Can you?" The woman's smile faded slightly. She shook her head and pointed to her throat, then to her lips, indicating that she couldn't speak. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry." She waved off his concern with a gentle gesture and pulled a small notepad from her pocket. She wrote quickly and handed him the note. "Your son is beautiful. He just needs to know he's safe. Some of us understand that feeling." Jonathan read the note twice, struck by the depth of understanding in those simple words. When he looked up, the woman was already heading out the door, her cart rolling silently across the marble floor. He found himself at the window, watching as she moved through the other offices with the same careful attention she had shown in his. There was something about her that he couldn't shake, the way she had immediately understood Blake's pain, the gentleness in her touch, the wisdom in her eyes that seemed far older than her years. Blake stirred on the couch, and Jonathan went to cover him with his suit jacket. As he tucked it around his son, he noticed that Blake's face was more relaxed than he had seen it in months. Jonathan made a mental note to stay late more often, hoping to encounter the mysterious cleaning woman again. He wanted to understand more about someone who could calm his troubled son with nothing more than shadow puppets and genuine compassion. As he gathered his papers to head home, Jonathan found himself thinking about the note she had left him. Some of us understand that feeling. What had happened to make this gentle woman understand the pain of a child who felt abandoned and unsafe? The question would stay with him long after he carried sleeping Blake to the car, long after they arrived at the penthouse, and long after Blake was tucked safely into his own bed. Jonathan Preston, a man who solved complex financial problems for a living, found himself facing a puzzle he couldn't analyze with spreadsheets or market projections. How do you help someone heal when you don't even know what broke them in the first place? The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Jonathan jolted awake to his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand, his heart already racing with the panic that comes from middle-of-the-night calls. "Mr. Preston? This is Dr. Rodriguez from Chicago Children's Hospital. Your son Blake is here in our emergency department." The words hit Jonathan like ice water. "What happened? Is he okay?" "He's stable now, but he had a severe allergic reaction while staying with his aunt. We need you to come in right away." Jonathan was dressed and out the door in under 5 minutes, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios as he drove through the empty streets toward the hospital. Blake's Aunt Jennifer had been watching him for the weekend while Jonathan attended a business conference in New York. She was careful with Blake's nut allergy. Everyone in the family knew about it. The emergency department was bright and busy despite the early hour. Jonathan found Dr. Rodriguez, a kind-looking woman in her 40s who explained what had happened. "Blake had a reaction to some cookies at a birthday party. Your sister-in-law administered his EpiPen immediately and called 911. The paramedics gave him additional epinephrine, and we've been monitoring him for the past few hours." Jonathan felt his knees weaken with relief. "Can I see him?" "Of course. He's been asking for you." Blake looked tiny in the hospital bed, his face still slightly swollen but breathing normally. Jennifer sat beside him, looking exhausted and guilty. "Jonathan, I'm so sorry," she began, but he cut her off with a hug. "You did everything right, Jen. Thank you for getting him here safely." Blake's eyes fluttered open when he heard his father's voice. "Dad? I thought you were in New York. I flew back as soon as I heard. How are you feeling, son?" "Tired and scared." Blake's voice was small and fragile. "I thought I was going to die." Jonathan felt his heart break all over again. He spent the next hour holding Blake's hand and reassuring him, but even with the medication wearing off, his son remained anxious and unable to rest. Dr. Rodriguez explained that they needed to keep Blake for observation until morning, just to be safe. Jennifer offered to stay, but Jonathan insisted she go home to her own children. As dawn approached, Blake grew increasingly restless despite his exhaustion. The unfamiliar sounds and smells of the hospital seemed to be keeping him on edge. Jonathan tried reading to him, tried talking about school and friends, but nothing seemed to help. Around 6 a.m., a soft knock on the door interrupted Jonathan's attempts to comfort his son. A familiar figure appeared in the doorway, the same woman from his office. now wearing scrubs instead of her cleaning uniform. Jonathan's surprise must have shown on his face, because she smiled slightly and pointed to the hospital badge clipped to her shirt pocket. She cleaned the hospital during the night shift as well. She looked at Blake with concern, the same gentle expression Jonathan had seen that night in his office. Blake noticed her too, his eyes brightening with recognition. "You're the shadow puppet lady," Blake said weakly. The woman nodded and approached his bedside slowly. She looked at Jonathan questioningly, and he nodded his permission, curious to see if she could work the same magic here that she had in the office. She pulled up a chair beside Blake's bed and took out her small notepad. She wrote something and showed it to Blake. "I heard you were very brave tonight. Shadow puppets in the hospital?" Blake managed a small smile. "There's not enough light." The woman looked around the room, then stood and dimmed the overhead lights. She positioned herself between Blake and the small bedside lamp, and suddenly the wall came alive with shadow figures. This time her puppets told a story. A brave little boy, obviously Blake, went on an adventure through a magical forest. He met friendly animals who helped him overcome challenges, and when he faced a scary monster, clearly representing the allergic reaction, all his animal friends came together to protect him. Blake watched with growing interest, his breathing becoming calmer as he followed the story. Jonathan found himself equally entranced, amazed at how this silent woman could create such an engaging narrative with nothing but her hands and a lamp. The story continued with the brave boy learning that he was stronger than he thought, that scary things could be overcome, and that he always had people who loved him watching over him. The final shadow showed the boy safely returning home, surrounded by all the friends who cared about him. When the story ended, Blake was fighting sleep, but he was smiling. "That was better than TV," he murmured. The woman wrote another note and showed it to Jonathan. "He needs to rest. Hospital can be scary for children. I can stay for a while if it helps." Jonathan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. "Would you? I mean, don't you need to finish your work?" She shook her head and settled into the chair more comfortably. She began making very small, gentle shadow movements on the wall, nothing dramatic, just soothing shapes that moved slowly and peacefully. Within minutes, Blake was fast asleep, his breathing deep and even. Jonathan watched in amazement as this woman he barely knew provided the comfort that he, with all his resources and love, hadn't been able to give his son. They sat in comfortable silence for nearly an hour, the woman occasionally adjusting her position to keep the gentle shadows moving. Jonathan found himself studying her profile in the dim light. She was beautiful in a quiet way, with expressive eyes and graceful hands that seemed to hold some kind of healing magic. Finally, she wrote another note. "You will sleep now. Children heal faster when they feel safe." "How do you know so much about scared children?" Jonathan asked softly. The woman hesitated, then wrote slowly. "I have a daughter. I understand what it means to want to protect them from everything that hurts." "What's her name?" "Your daughter?" "Mara. She's 4. Jonathan smiled. "That's a beautiful name. Is she why you work 2 jobs?" The woman nodded, then wrote. "We take care of each other. It's worth it." Something in the way she wrote those words made Jonathan realize this woman was carrying her own heavy burden. He wondered about the father, about the circumstances that had led her to work nights while caring for a young daughter. "I'm Jonathan, by the way. Jonathan Preston." She smiled and wrote. "I know. I clean your office. I'm Simone." "Simone." Jonathan repeated the name, liking the sound of it. "It's nice to officially meet you, Simone." A nurse came in to check on Blake, and Simone quietly excused herself. She left one final note on Jonathan's lap. "Your son is lucky to have a father who loves him so much. Call me if he needs more shadow puppet stories." Below the message, she had written her phone number. Jonathan stared at the paper for a long time after she left, surprised by how much he wanted to call that number for reasons that had nothing to do with shadow puppets. Dr. Rodriguez discharged Blake that afternoon with strict instructions about allergy management and follow-up care. As they prepared to leave, Blake asked, "Dad, will we see the shadow puppet lady again?" "I hope so, son. I really hope so." As Jonathan drove Blake home, he found himself thinking not just about his son's recovery, but about the mysterious woman who seemed to appear exactly when they needed her most. Twice now, Simone had brought peace to his troubled child in ways that professional therapists and expensive specialists had failed to achieve. The phone number in his pocket felt like a lifeline, though to what, he wasn't entirely sure yet. 2 weeks after the hospital incident, Jonathan found himself staying late at the office more frequently than necessary. He told himself it was to catch up on work, but the truth was simpler. He was hoping to see Simone again. Blake had been asking about her constantly since that night at the hospital. "When will we see the shadow puppet lady again, Dad?" had become his most frequent question. Jonathan had tried to explain that she worked at night and they usually went home before she arrived, but Blake's disappointment was hard to bear. Finally, on a Friday evening, Jonathan made a decision. Instead of taking Blake home after their dinner together, he brought him back to the office. "Are we going to work, Dad?" Blake asked as they rode the elevator to the executive floor. "Not exactly. I have some papers to review and I thought maybe we might run into our friend Simone." Blake's face lit up with excitement. "Really? She's here tonight?" "I think so. But we have to be quiet and let her do her job, okay?" They settled into Jonathan's office around 10 p.m. Jonathan spread some papers across his desk while Blake colored in a workbook at the conference table. Every few minutes, Blake would look up hopefully at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. At 10:45, Jonathan heard the soft sound of wheels on marble that he had come to recognize. Blake heard it too and sat up straighter, his crayon forgotten. Simone appeared in the doorway, her cleaning cart beside her. When she saw them, her face broke into a genuine smile of surprise and pleasure. She waved at Blake, who bounded up from his chair. "Simone, you're here. Dad said we might see you, and I hoped you would be working tonight, and I brought my coloring book to show you." Blake's words tumbled out in an excited rush as he ran to her. Simone knelt down to his level and accepted the coloring book he thrust into her hands. She flipped through the pages, nodding appreciatively at his artwork. She pulled out her notepad and wrote, "These are wonderful, Blake. You're a great artist. Thank you. I drew this one for you." Blake pointed to a picture of a woman surrounded by shadow animals. "It's you making the shadow puppets that helped me feel better in the hospital." Simone studied the drawing carefully, and Jonathan could see tears forming in her eyes. She wrote another note. "This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. Can I keep it?" Blake nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. Dad, can we stay while Simone works?" "I promise I'll be quiet." Jonathan looked at Simone questioningly. She nodded and gestured that they were welcome to stay. As she began cleaning the office, Blake watched her every movement with fascination. Jonathan found himself watching too, noticing details he had missed before. The way she hummed very softly while she worked, so quietly it was almost inaudible. How she always put things back in exactly the same position she found them. The small smile that crossed her face when she caught Blake imitating her dusting motions with an imaginary cloth. "Simone," Blake said suddenly, "why don't you talk out loud?" Jonathan felt a moment of panic, worried that Blake's directness might be hurtful. But Simone didn't seem offended. She paused in her work and wrote a note. "Sometimes people lose their voices for a while. But I can still communicate in other ways. Did it hurt when you lost your voice?" Simone hesitated, then wrote, "Yes, it did hurt. But having friends like you makes it better." Blake seemed satisfied with this answer. "My mom lost her voice too, kind of. She moved far away and doesn't call very much anymore." Jonathan felt his chest tighten. Blake had never made this connection before between his mother's absence and losing someone's voice. Simone stopped cleaning and came to sit beside Blake. She wrote a longer note. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems that make it hard for them to use their voices, even when they love their children very much. That doesn't mean it's your fault and it doesn't mean they don't love you." Blake read the note carefully, then looked up at Simone. "Do you think my mom still loves me even if she doesn't call?" "Yes, I do. Love doesn't disappear just because voices do." Jonathan watched this exchange with amazement. In one brief conversation conducted through notes, Simone had addressed something that months of therapy sessions had failed to touch. As the evening continued, Blake grew more comfortable asking Simone questions and reading her responses. He told her about school, his friends, and his upcoming soccer season. She truly listened to every word, responding with thoughtful notes and encouraging gestures. When Blake mentioned that he was nervous about the soccer tryouts, Simone wrote, "Being nervous means you care about doing well. That's a good thing. Want to know a secret?" Blake nodded eagerly. "I bet your dad gets nervous about important things too. All brave people do." Blake looked at Jonathan with surprise. "Dad, do you get nervous?" Jonathan considered lying, giving the standard parent response about everything being fine. But Simone's honest approach inspired him to be equally truthful. "Yes, I do get nervous. I get nervous about being a good father to you. I get nervous about my work sometimes. I even get nervous about making friends." "Really? But you're a grown-up." "Grown-ups have feelings just like kids do. We just get better at handling them." Simone nodded approvingly and wrote, "Your dad is very brave. It takes courage to admit when we're scared." The conversation continued as Simone finished her work. Jonathan found himself sharing more with her than he had with anyone in years, communicating through a combination of spoken words and written notes. There was something freeing about this unusual form of conversation. It made him think more carefully about what he wanted to say. When Simone finished cleaning, Blake was disappointed to see her preparing to leave. "Will you be here next Friday too?" She smiled and nodded, then wrote, "If your dad doesn't mind bringing you by again." "Can we, Dad? Please?" Jonathan looked at Simone, seeing something in her expression that matched what he was feeling. "I think we can arrange that." As they prepared to leave, Simone wrote one final note and handed it to Jonathan. "Thank you for letting me spend time with Blake. He's a special boy and you're doing a wonderful job raising him." Walking to the car with Blake chattering excitedly about their evening, Jonathan felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just hope that Blake was beginning to heal from his emotional wounds, but hope that he himself might be finding something he hadn't even known he was looking for. The note from Simone was folded in his pocket, and he found himself looking forward to next Friday with an anticipation that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or business meetings. For the first time since his divorce, Jonathan Preston was looking forward to simply being with someone who seemed to understand both him and his son in ways that words alone couldn't express. Jonathan found himself thinking about Simone throughout the following week in ways that surprised him. It wasn't just her kindness to Blake that stayed with him, though that meant everything. It was something deeper: the way she communicated so much with so few words, the gentle strength he sensed beneath her quiet exterior, and the mysterious sadness in her eyes that he wanted to understand and somehow ease. On Wednesday morning, he found himself in the coffee shop downstairs from his office, staring at the menu board and thinking about what kind of coffee Simone might like. The thought embarrassed him slightly. He was a successful businessman, not a teenager with a crush, but he couldn't shake the impulse to do something nice for her. He settled on a simple medium coffee with cream and sugar on the side, along with a blueberry muffin. Nothing too personal, just a small gesture of thanks for her kindness to Blake. That evening, he left the coffee and muffin on his desk with a note. "Thank you for being so wonderful to Blake. I hope you enjoy this small treat, Jonathan." Friday morning, he found a response written on the back of his note. "The coffee was perfect and the muffin was delicious. Thank you for thinking of me. Blake is lucky to have such a caring father. Simone." The simple exchange made Jonathan smile for the rest of the day. Friday evening arrived with an October chill in the air. Jonathan had spent the afternoon shopping for a warm jacket he had noticed Simone needed when he saw her walking to the bus stop after her shift ended. The jacket, a soft navy blue wool coat, was sitting in a gift bag in his office when Blake bounced in at 7 p.m. "Is Simone here yet, Dad? I made her another picture." "Not yet, son. She usually starts around 10:30. What did you draw this time?" Blake proudly displayed a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. "It's you, me, and Simone. We're friends." Jonathan studied the simple drawing, surprised by the warmth it generated in his chest. "It's beautiful, Blake." When Simone arrived, Blake immediately ran to show her his latest artwork. Her face lit up as she examined the drawing, and she wrote an enthusiastic response. "I love it. Can I put it up while I work so everyone can see how talented you are?" She taped the drawing to her cleaning cart, where it fluttered cheerfully as she moved from room to room. Blake was delighted to see his artwork on display. As Simone began her cleaning routine, Jonathan cleared his throat nervously. "Simone, I noticed it's getting colder outside. I thought you might need this." He handed her the gift bag, feeling uncharacteristically nervous about her reaction. Simone opened the bag and pulled out the jacket, her eyes widening with surprise. She held it against herself, feeling the soft wool, then wrote quickly, "This is too much. I can't accept something so expensive." "Please," Jonathan said gently. "I see you at the bus stop sometimes, and Chicago winters are brutal. I would feel terrible if you got sick because you didn't have a warm coat." Simone hesitated, clearly torn between gratitude and pride. Blake settled the matter for her. "Simone, you have to keep it. Dad bought it special for you because he cares about you. And it matches your eyes." Blake was right, the navy blue did complement her warm brown eyes beautifully. Simone smiled and wrote, "Thank you both. I will treasure it." She put the jacket on immediately, and Jonathan felt a deep satisfaction seeing how perfectly it fit. As the evening progressed, their conversations through notes became more personal. Simone told them about Amara's latest achievement, learning to write her own name, and how proud she was of her daughter's progress in preschool. Blake asked endless questions about Amara. What was her favorite color? Did she like to draw? Could they meet sometime? Each question was answered patiently by Simone, who seemed to enjoy talking about her daughter as much as Blake enjoyed hearing about her. When Blake mentioned that his school was having a Halloween party next week, Simone wrote, "What's your costume going to be?" "I don't know yet. Dad said we could go shopping this weekend, but I can't decide between a superhero and a dinosaur. Both are excellent choices. Amara is going to be a princess. She's been practicing her royal wave." Simone demonstrated her exaggerated princess wave that made Blake giggle. Jonathan found himself asking, how does she practice without? "I mean, do you help her with her costume at home?" Simone nodded and wrote, "We use gestures and drawings to plan it. She's very creative at figuring out what I mean. Children adapt better than adults sometimes." There was something wistful in that last sentence that made Jonathan wonder about the adults in Simone's life. Did she have family? Friends who knew sign language? How isolated was she in her silent world? As if reading his thoughts, Simone wrote another note. "Blake makes communication feel natural. Most people get uncomfortable when they realize I can't speak back to them. That's their loss," Jonathan said without thinking. "Some of the most meaningful conversations I've had lately have been with you." Simone looked up from her cleaning, surprise and something warmer flickering across her face. She wrote, "That's one of the kindest things anyone has ever said to me." The moment felt charged with possibility, but Blake chose that instant to announce he was hungry, breaking the spell. "Can we order pizza, Dad? And can Simone eat with us? Please?" Jonathan looked at Simone questioningly. She checked her watch and wrote, "I have 2 more floors to clean, but I could take a short break." An hour later, they were sitting around Jonathan's conference table sharing pizza and talking, or in Simone's case, writing about everything from favorite movies to childhood memories. Blake was in his element, chattering happily between bites and making both adults smile with his observations about life. "Simone," Blake said thoughtfully, "do you ever get lonely not talking?" It was such an innocent question from a child, but Jonathan held his breath waiting for her response. Simone considered the question seriously, then wrote, "Sometimes I do get lonely. But tonight with you and your dad, I don't feel lonely at all." Something passed between Jonathan and Simone in that moment, an understanding, a recognition, a possibility neither was quite ready to name. When it was time for them to leave, Simone walked them to the elevator. Blake gave her an enthusiastic hug, and she knelt down to his level to return it properly. "Simone," Blake said seriously, "I think you're the nicest lady I ever met. I wish you could be my mom." The innocent comment hit all 3 adults like a physical blow. Blake had no idea what he had said, but Jonathan saw Simone's eyes fill with tears, happy tears mixed with something sadder. She wrote hastily, "You already have a mom who loves you, Blake. But I'm honored to be your friend." In the elevator, Blake chattered about their evening while Jonathan found himself lost in thought. Blake's comment had been innocent, but it had revealed something Jonathan was only beginning to acknowledge. Somewhere between shadow puppets and pizza dinners, he had started imagining what it would be like if Simone were more than just a friend. The thought should have scared him. Instead, as he carried sleepy Blake to the car, Jonathan found himself looking forward to next Friday with an intensity that felt dangerously close to hope. The invitation had been Blake's idea entirely, presented with the logic only an 8-year-old could muster. "Dad, if Simone is our friend and friends come to birthday parties, then Simone should come to my birthday party, right?" Jonathan had been planning a simple celebration, just him, Blake, and maybe Jennifer's family at the penthouse. But Blake's suggestion made perfect sense, especially when he added, "And she can bring Amara. I want to meet her." So on a Saturday afternoon in early November, Jonathan found himself nervously arranging furniture in his penthouse living room, second-guessing everything from the food choices to the decorations. He had invited Simone through a note left at the office, explaining that it was a small family gathering and that both she and Amara were welcome. Her response had been hesitant at first. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude on a family celebration." Blake had solved that problem by writing his own note in his careful 8-year-old handwriting. "Dear Simone, please come to my party. It won't be fun without you and Amara. You are family to me. Love, Blake." That note had sealed the deal. Now, as Jonathan waited for his guest to arrive, he realized he was more nervous about this casual birthday party than he had been about multimillion-dollar business presentations. What if Simone felt out of place in his world? What if the girls didn't get along? What? The doorbell rang, interrupting his spiraling thoughts. Jonathan opened the door to find Simone holding hands with a beautiful little girl who was clearly her daughter. Amara had the same warm eyes and gentle demeanor as her mother, but where Simone moved quietly through the world, Amara bounced with 4-year-old energy. "Hi," Amara said immediately, looking up at Jonathan with curiosity and confidence. Are you Blake's daddy? Mama said you're very nice and have lots of books. Jonathan knelt down to Amara's level, charmed by her directness. I am Blake's daddy, and your mama is right, I do have lots of books. Would you like to see some of them? Yes, please. Mama reads to me every night, but she does voices without talking. She's the best at voices. Jonathan looked at Simone, who was smiling at her daughter's chatter. She had worn a simple green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes, and her hair was styled differently than her work ponytail. She looked beautiful and slightly nervous. Blake appeared at Jonathan's shoulder, having heard voices. Simone. Amara. You came. The introduction between the children was instantaneous and magical. Within minutes, Blake was showing Amara his room, his games, and his collection of books. The age difference seemed irrelevant as they discovered shared interests in drawing, animals, and stories. Jennifer arrived with her family shortly after, and Jonathan watched carefully to see how Simone would handle meeting new people. His sister was warm and welcoming, though clearly curious about the beautiful woman who communicated through notes. Jonathan's told me so much about you, Jennifer said to Simone. Blake talks about you constantly. He says you make the best shadow puppets in the world. Simone smiled and wrote. Blake is very kind. Your brother has raised a wonderful son. He's trying his best, Jennifer replied, glancing meaningfully at Jonathan. We all are. The party moved smoothly from gifts to cake to games. Jonathan found himself constantly aware of Simone's presence, watching how she interacted with everyone. She was quietly observant, seeming to understand conversations even when she couldn't participate verbally. When someone addressed her directly, she would write quick responses that were often thoughtful and sometimes genuinely funny. During cake time, Amara climbed onto Simone's lap and whispered something in her ear. Simone nodded and wrote a note that she showed to the group. Amara wants to know if she can sing Happy Birthday to Blake. She's been practicing. Of course she can, Jonathan said. We'd love to hear it. Amara's rendition of Happy Birthday was enthusiastic if not entirely on key, but her joy was infectious. Blake beamed throughout the song, clearly delighted to have someone his age celebrating with him. After cake, the children settled in the living room to play with Blake's new toys. The adults found themselves on Jonathan's terrace, enjoying the surprisingly warm November afternoon and watching the city spread out below them. This is beautiful, Jennifer said, admiring the view. Simone, what do you think of living in Chicago? Are you from here originally? Simone wrote. I grew up here, but I see it differently now than I did as a child. It feels bigger and smaller at the same time. That's very poetic, Jennifer said. What do you mean? Bigger because there are more places I can't go, more conversations I can't join. Smaller because the world shrinks when you have to be careful about everything. The honesty of the response created a moment of thoughtful silence. Jonathan found himself wondering again about the circumstances that had led to Simone's silence, and about the care she mentioned having to take. Well, Jennifer said finally, I'm glad Jonathan and Blake found you. Blake has been happier in the past few weeks than I've seen him since the divorce. Simone looked at Jonathan with an expression he couldn't quite read, then wrote. They found me at exactly the right time. Sometimes I think we meet people when we need them most. The afternoon continued with games and conversation. Jonathan watched Simone with Amara and Blake, seeing how naturally she moved between the two children's different needs. She was endlessly patient with their questions and games, and both children clearly adored her. When Amara spilled juice on her dress, Simone handled it calmly and efficiently. When Blake got frustrated with a complicated toy, she helped him work through the problem without taking over. She seemed to instinctively know when to offer help and when to let the children figure things out for themselves. You're really good with kids, Jonathan said during a quiet moment when the children were playing independently. Simone wrote, children are honest. They don't pretend to understand when they don't, and they don't judge you for being different. Is that why you work nights? To avoid complications? Partly. But also because Amara needs me home in the evenings. We have our routines. What's she like at home? Amara? Simone's expression softened as she wrote. She talks for both of us. She tells me about her day, asks questions about everything, makes up stories. She's teaching herself to read because she wants to help me write notes. She's the best part of my life. Jonathan felt something twist in his chest reading those words. The love in Simone's face as she wrote about her daughter was unmistakable, but there was also something else, a fierce protectiveness that spoke of hard-won lessons. As the sun began to set, it became clear that the party was winding down. Jennifer gathered her family, thanking Simone for coming and inviting her to future gatherings. The children were disappointed to separate, already making plans for the next time they could play together. As Jonathan walked Simone and Amara to the elevator, Amara suddenly ran back to Blake for one more hug. In the moment they were alone, Simone wrote quickly, "Thank you for including us today. Amara hasn't had this much fun with other children in a long time. Thank you for coming." This was the best birthday Blake's had since his mother left. The elevator arrived, but before getting on, Simone wrote one more note. "Blake is lucky to have you. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough." The doors closed before Jonathan could respond, but her words stayed with him long after they were gone. As he cleaned up the party remains with Blake's enthusiastic help, Jonathan found himself thinking about family, not just the family he had, but the family he was beginning to imagine he might want. Blake's sleepy voice interrupted his thoughts. "Dad, this was the best birthday ever. Can we have Simone and Amara over again soon?" "I think we can arrange that, son." "Good. I think they need us as much as we need them." Out of the mouths of babes, Jonathan thought, carrying his wise son to bed. Out of the mouths of babes. 3 weeks after Blake's birthday party, Jonathan had established a comfortable routine of bringing Blake to the office on Friday evenings to spend time with Simone. What had started as an impromptu encounter had become the highlight of all 3 of their weeks. Blake had even started referring to it as Simone Night, and would spend the entire week collecting things to show her: drawings, school papers, interesting rocks he found, and endless questions about Amara. On this particular Friday in late November, Jonathan had decided to take their friendship a step further. The weather had turned crisp and beautiful, perfect for the outdoor adventure he had planned. "Where are we going, Dad?" Blake asked as they drove toward Lincoln Park instead of downtown. "I thought we'd have a picnic today. Simone and Amara are meeting us at the park." Blake's face lit up with excitement. "Really? We get to see Amara too? This is the best day ever." Jonathan had coordinated the outing through their usual note exchange, and Simone had agreed somewhat hesitantly. He suspected she wasn't used to spontaneous social activities, but Blake's enthusiasm had been impossible to resist. They found Simone and Amara waiting by the playground, both bundled up in warm coats. Amara was practically vibrating with excitement at seeing Blake again, while Simone looked beautiful but nervous in the afternoon sunlight. "Blake, Blake," Amara called, running toward them. "Mama said we're having a picnic like in storybooks." The children immediately ran off toward the playground equipment, leaving Jonathan and Simone to follow with the picnic supplies. Jonathan had perhaps gone overboard with the planning: blankets, a full basket of food, drinks, and even a small speaker for background music. "I hope this isn't too much," Jonathan said as he spread out the blanket. "I wanted it to be special." Simone wrote, "It's perfect. Amara has been talking about it all week. She's never been on a real picnic before." They settled on the blanket while the children played nearby, close enough to supervise but far enough to give themselves space for conversation. Jonathan had packed sandwiches, fruit, and Blake's favorite cookies, along with juice boxes for the kids. The afternoon was relaxed and comfortable in a way that surprised Jonathan. Watching Simone in the natural sunlight, seeing her laugh silently at the children's antics, he felt a contentment he hadn't experienced in years. Blake and Amara had discovered the playground's climbing structure and were engaged in an elaborate game that seemed to involve pretending to be mountain explorers. Their voices carried across the park, full of joy and imagination. "They're good together," Jonathan observed. "Amara doesn't have many opportunities to play with other children. She lights up around Blake. Blake feels the same way. You've given him something I couldn't, a sense that family doesn't have to look traditional to be real." Simone looked at him questioningly, and he continued, "He told me the other day that families are people who take care of each other and have fun together. When I asked where he learned that, he said Amara told him and Amara learned it from you." Simone's cheeks colored slightly as she wrote, "Children understand love better than adults sometimes. They don't complicate it with rules and expectations." The conversation was interrupted by Blake calling from the playground. "Dad, Simone, come see how high I can climb." They walked over to admire Blake's climbing skills, with Amara providing enthusiastic commentary. "He's almost to the top. He's so brave. Mama, look how high Blake is." The playground equipment was taller than Jonathan was comfortable with, but Blake was a good climber and seemed confident. Jonathan positioned himself beneath the structure, ready to spot his son if needed. "Be careful up there, Blake," he called. "I'm okay, Dad. I can see the whole park from here." "Hey, there's a dog down there that's bigger than Amara." Everyone laughed and Blake began his descent. He was about halfway down when something went wrong. His foot slipped on a crossbar that was slick with condensation from the cold air. Jonathan watched in horror as Blake lost his grip and fell backward, his body twisting as he dropped toward the hard-packed earth below. Blake! The scream tore from Simone's throat with such force that it seemed to shake the very air around them. Her voice was raw, powerful, and filled with more fear and love than Jonathan had ever heard in a single word. Time seemed suspended for a moment after her voice rang out. Blake, startled by the sound, managed to grab a lower bar and break his fall, landing hard but safely on his feet. He was shaken but unharmed. But Simone stood frozen in place, her hand pressed to her throat, her eyes wide with shock and terror. She had spoken. After 3 years of silence, she had broken her vow in a moment of pure instinct to protect a child she loved. Blake ran to her immediately, wrapping his arms around her waist. Simone, you talked. You said my name. Are you okay? Tears were streaming down Simone's face as she knelt down to Blake's level, checking him for injuries with shaking hands. She tried to write a note, but her hands were trembling too badly to hold the pen. Jonathan approached slowly, his own heart racing from the scare and from witnessing Simone's breakthrough. Blake's okay, he said gently. You helped save him by calling out. Simone shook her head frantically, still unable to write. The fear in her eyes wasn't just about Blake's near accident, it was about something much deeper and more threatening. Amara, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, came over to her mother. Mama? Why are you scared? Blake is safe now. Jonathan knelt down beside Simone, speaking softly. Hey, it's okay. You spoke because you needed to. There's nothing wrong with that. Finally, Simone managed to write, though her handwriting was shaky. I can't. I'm not supposed to speak. It's not safe. Not safe from who? Jonathan asked gently. But Simone just shook her head, gathering Amara into her arms as if protecting her from some invisible threat. Blake, still confused but sensing the adult's distress, tried to help. Simone, it's okay that you talked. Your voice is beautiful. Nobody's going to be mad at you for helping me. Jonathan realized they needed to move somewhere more private. Why don't we go back to my place? We can talk there or not talk, whatever you're comfortable with. Simone nodded gratefully, clearly wanting to get away from the open park where her voice had carried. Back at the penthouse, Jonathan sent the children to Blake's room to play while he sat with Simone on the couch. She had stopped crying but still looked shaken. Simone, he said carefully, I don't know what happened to make you stop speaking, but I want you to know you're safe here. Whatever you're afraid of, we can figure it out together. She wrote slowly. I haven't spoken in 3 years. I promised I wouldn't. Promised who? Her hand hesitated over the paper for a long time before she wrote. Someone who could hurt Amara if I broke my promise. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. Simone, are you in danger? Is someone threatening you? She looked toward Blake's room where they could hear the children playing happily, then back at Jonathan. Very quietly, so softly he almost missed it, she whispered, yes. It was the second word she had spoken in 3 years, and it changed everything. Jonathan moved closer to her on the couch, his voice gentle but urgent. Tell me what's happening. Let me help you. Simone looked into his eyes for a long moment, and he could see her wrestling with 3 years of fear and silence. Finally, in a voice rusty from disuse but growing stronger with each word, she began to speak. His name is Terrell. He's Amara's father. Want to know what happens when someone finally breaks their silence after 3 years of fear? Keep reading and don't forget to subscribe. This story shows how love can overcome the darkest threats. What would you do if speaking up could put your child in danger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Simone's voice was barely above a whisper, rusty and uncertain after 3 years of silence, but each word felt like a victory and a betrayal all at once. Terrell he was never officially Amara's father on paper, but he claimed her as his. We lived together for 2 years when she was little. Simone's hands shook as she spoke, and Jonathan noticed she kept glancing toward Blake's room where the children were playing. What happened? Jonathan asked gently, though he suspected he already knew the answer would be difficult to hear. He was controlling from the beginning, but it got worse after Amara was born. He said I belonged to him, that Amara belonged to him. He didn't want me working, didn't want me having friends or talking to my family. He said a woman's job was to take care of her man and keep her mouth shut. Jonathan felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral, sensing that Simone needed to get this out without interruption. I tried to leave him several times, but he always found me. He knew people, had connections. He'd show up at my job and get me fired, or he'd charm my landlords into evicting me. He made it impossible for me to build a life without him. Simone's voice was getting stronger, as if the act of speaking was loosening something that had been locked tight for years. The last time I tried to leave, I had saved enough money for a security deposit on a small apartment. I had enrolled Amara in a daycare near my sister's house. I thought we could start over. She paused, touching her throat as if the words were painful to form. He caught me packing. She stopped, looking again toward the children's laughter coming from Blake's room. You don't have to tell me everything, Jonathan said softly. Just what you're comfortable sharing. No, I need to say it. I've been carrying it alone for too long. Simone straightened her shoulders with visible effort. He hit me. Not for the first time, but harder than before. And then he picked up Amara. She was only 2 and he held her while he told me what he would do to both of us if I ever tried to leave again or if I ever spoke against him to anyone. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. He threatened a baby. He said if I ever used my voice to ask for help, to call the police, to tell my family what was happening, or to speak against him in court, he would make sure both Amara and I disappeared. He said he had friends who could make that happen and no one would ever find us. The casual way Simone recounted the threat made it somehow more chilling. Jonathan could see that she had lived with this fear for so long it had become part of her daily reality. He told me the only way to keep Amara safe was to keep my mouth shut. Literally. He said if I never spoke again he would leave us alone. But the minute I used my voice, he would know and he would come for us. Simone, that's psychological torture. She nodded. I know that now. But then, with a 2-year-old daughter and no support system, it seemed like the only choice. I stopped speaking that night. I figured out how to communicate with gestures and notes, got jobs where I could work quietly, and moved us to a different part of the city. Has he bothered you since then? Not directly. But I see his friends sometimes. Men who look at me in ways that let me know I'm still being watched. I get text messages on Amara's birthday every year, just a photo of her at school or at the park, to remind me he could reach her anytime he wants. Jonathan felt sick. Simone, this is stalking. This is criminal intimidation. We can get help. With what proof? Simone's voice was getting clearer, stronger. Text messages from unknown numbers? Photos that could have been taken by anyone? Terrell is smart. He never does anything that could be traced back to him. What about your family? Your sister? I told them I had developed anxiety and couldn't speak anymore. They believed it at first, but over time, people get uncomfortable around someone who won't talk back. The invitations stopped coming. The phone calls became less frequent. It was easier for everyone if we just faded away. Jonathan understood now why Simone had seemed so isolated, why she worked nights, why she was so protective of Amara. She had built her entire life around avoiding a threat that followed her everywhere. Simone, speaking today, calling out Blake's name, that was an act of love. You broke 3 years of silence to help my son. Tears started flowing down her face again. And now he'll know. Somehow he'll find out. People talk, word gets around. I put Amara in danger because I couldn't control myself. No. Jonathan's voice was firm. You saved Blake from getting seriously hurt, maybe worse. And you know what? I'm glad you spoke. Your voice is part of who you are, and no one has the right to take that away from you. But what if he comes back? What if he tries to take Amara? Jonathan moved closer to her on the couch. Then we'll deal with it. Together. Simone, you don't have to face this alone anymore. I can't ask you to get involved in this. You have Blake to think about. Terrell is dangerous. And you have Amara to think about, but that didn't stop you from risking everything to help my son. Jonathan caught her hands in his. Let me help you. I have resources, connections. We can get you and Amara protection. Simone looked into his eyes, searching for something. Why would you do that for us? The question hung in the air between them. Jonathan realized this was the moment to be completely honest, to say what he had been feeling for weeks but hadn't dared to acknowledge. Because I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. Because Blake loves you and Amara like family. Because nobody should have to live in fear the way you have been. And because your voice, the few words I've heard today, is beautiful, and the world is a better place when you're in it and able to speak. Simone stared at him, clearly shocked by his confession. Jonathan, I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I'm just asking you to let me help. Let me give you and Amara a safe place to live. Let me hire security if we need to. Let me help you find your voice again, completely and safely. I don't know how to accept help like that. I've been taking care of us alone for so long. You don't have to decide everything right now. Just stay tonight. Both of you. Take the guest room. In the morning we can start figuring out how to make your life safer. From Blake's room they heard the children giggling about something. The sound was so normal, so innocent, that it highlighted the contrast with the heavy conversation they had been having. They sound happy, Simone said softly. They are happy. And they should stay that way. Both of them. Simone was quiet for a long moment, then she spoke in her emerging voice, still careful but growing more confident. Okay. We'll stay tonight. But Jonathan, if this gets dangerous, if Terrell shows up or threatens Blake in any way, I'll leave immediately. I won't let my problems hurt your son. Our problems? Jonathan corrected gently. From now on, these are our problems and we'll solve them together. As if summoned by their conversation, Blake and Amara appeared in the living room doorway. Simone. Blake said excitedly. Are you talking now? Your voice sounds pretty. Amara looked at her mother with wonder. Mama, you're using your talking voice. Like at home when we're alone. The statement surprised Jonathan. You talk to Amara at home? Simone's cheeks colored. Whispers. Bedtime stories. I couldn't stay completely silent with her, but I taught her it was our secret. I kept the secret really good, Mama, Amara said proudly. I never told anyone you could talk. Blake looked confused. Why was it a secret? Simone knelt down to both children's level. In her careful, growing voice she said, sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult choices to keep the people they love safe. I stopped talking for a while because I thought it would protect Amara. But today, when Blake was in danger, I realized that sometimes we have to be brave even when we're scared. Are you going to keep talking now? Blake asked hopefully. Simone looked at Jonathan, then back at the children. I'm going to try. With people I trust. With people who make me feel safe. Good, Blake said matter-of-factly. Because families should be able to talk to each other. The simple statement from an 8-year-old cut straight to the heart of everything. Jonathan felt something settle in his chest, not just love for Simone, but a determination to protect this fragile, growing family they were creating together. Whatever came next with Terrell, whatever legal or security challenges they might face, they would handle it together. Simone had found her voice again, and Jonathan was going to make sure she never had to lose it again. 3 weeks after Simone broke her silence, life felt almost normal. Jonathan had arranged for Simone and Amara to move into a secure apartment building he owned, complete with doorman and security cameras. He had also hired a discreet security firm to do background monitoring, checking for any sign that Terrell was becoming active again. Simone's voice grew stronger each day. She had started working in Jonathan's office during regular hours as his executive assistant, a job that utilized her intelligence and attention to detail while keeping her in a safe, controlled environment. Blake and Amara spent afternoons together at an after-school program, becoming as close as siblings. It felt too good to last, and unfortunately it was. The call came on a Tuesday morning in mid-December. Jonathan was in a meeting when his phone buzzed with a text from Simone. He's here. Terrell is at the apartment building. I can see him from my window. Jonathan excused himself from the meeting and called her immediately. Are you safe? Are the doors locked? Yes, we're inside and the building has security, but Jonathan. Her voice was shaking. He's not alone. There are 2 other men with him and they're not leaving. They're just standing there looking up at my windows. I'm sending my security team over right now. Don't open the door for anyone except building security or the police. Should I call the police? Jonathan hesitated. They had discussed this scenario, and the reality was complicated. Terrell hadn't technically done anything illegal by standing on a public sidewalk, and his past threats would be difficult to prove without evidence. Let's see what my security team finds out first. They're professionals and they'll know how to handle this legally. Within an hour, Jonathan's head of security, Marcus Rodriguez, called with an update. The men were gone by the time we arrived, but we reviewed the building's security cameras. One of them is definitely Terrell Jackson, matches the photo you provided. The other 2 are unknown, but they all arrived together in a black SUV with Illinois plates. Did they approach the building? No, they stayed on the sidewalk. But Mr. Preston, this wasn't casual surveillance. They were sending a message. They wanted Ms. Washington to know they could find her anytime they wanted. Jonathan felt cold dread settling in his stomach. What do you recommend? Increase security for now, but honestly, this guy is escalating. Standing outside someone's home with backup is intimidation, and it suggests he's planning something more direct soon. When Jonathan arrived at Simone's apartment that evening, he found her and Amara packed and ready to leave. We can't stay here, Simone said as soon as he walked in. If Terrell found this place, nowhere is safe. I have to take Amara and disappear again. Running didn't work before and it won't work now, Jonathan said gently. Simone, you have resources now that you didn't have 3 years ago. You have support, you have security, and you have legal options. I have a 4-year-old daughter who could get hurt because her mother was selfish enough to start speaking again. Jonathan knelt down in front of Amara, who was sitting on the couch clutching her favorite stuffed animal. Hey, princess. Are you scared? Amara nodded solemnly. Mama says we might have to move again because a bad man wants to hurt us. Well, that bad man doesn't know that your mama has friends now. Really strong friends who won't let him hurt anyone. Like you and Blake? Like me and Blake and a lot of other people too. Do you trust me to help keep you and your mama safe? Amara looked at her mother, then back at Jonathan. Mama says you're the best person she ever met. So yes, I trust you. Jonathan felt his heart squeeze. He stood up and faced Simone. We're not running. Tomorrow we're going to see a lawyer I know who specializes in domestic violence cases. We're going to get restraining orders, we're going to document everything, and we're going to make it legally impossible for Terrell to contact you or Amara ever again. What if the legal system doesn't work? What if he doesn't care about restraining orders? Then we'll be ready with other measures. But Simone, you can't spend the rest of your life hiding. Amara deserves better than that, and so do you. That night, Simone and Amara stayed at Jonathan's penthouse. Blake was thrilled to have them there, treating it like the world's best sleepover. The children fell asleep together on the couch watching a movie, and Jonathan carried them both to Blake's room. When he returned to the living room, he found Simone standing at the window looking out at the city lights. I keep thinking I see him everywhere, she said softly. Every tall man, every dark car. I lived with this fear for 3 years and I thought I was getting past it. Jonathan came up behind her, not touching but close enough to offer comfort. Fear is normal. What you've been through would traumatize anyone. But you're not alone in dealing with it anymore. What if something happens to you or Blake because of me? I couldn't live with that. Nothing is going to happen to any of us. But Simone, even if there was risk, do you really think I would just let you and Amara face this alone? She turned to look at him. Why are you willing to do this? Really? Jonathan had thought about this question a lot over the past few weeks. Because you did the same thing for Blake. You put yourself at risk by speaking up to save him. Because you and Amara deserve to live without fear. And because... He paused, then continued, because I love you. Both of you. You're family to us now. Tears gathered in Simone's eyes. I love you too. I didn't think I'd ever feel safe enough to love anyone again, but you and Blake made it impossible not to. They were interrupted by Jonathan's phone ringing. The number was unknown. Don't answer it, Simone said immediately. It could be him. But Jonathan was tired of letting Terrell control their lives through fear. He answered on the third ring. Jonathan Preston. You don't know me, but I know you. The voice was deep, confident, and unmistakably threatening. You've been spending a lot of time with something that belongs to me. If this is Terrell Jackson, you should know that this call is being recorded and that you're in violation of several laws by threatening me. A low chuckle. I'm not threatening you, Mr. Preston. I'm just letting you know that you've gotten involved in something that's none of your business. Simone and my daughter belong with me and I'm going to collect them very soon. Simone and Amara don't belong to anyone. And if you come near them, you'll have to go through me. Is that what you think? You're some kind of hero? Let me tell you something, rich boy. You live in a fancy building with security cameras and doormen. You drive the same route to work every day. Your son goes to Lincoln Elementary and plays soccer on Saturday mornings. Should I continue? Jonathan felt ice in his veins. Terrell had been watching all of them, learning their routines, planning something. If you so much as look at my son, then give me back what's mine and your son stays safe. You have until Friday to convince Simone to come home where she belongs. After that, I start taking back what's mine piece by piece. The line went dead. Jonathan immediately called his security team, then the police. But as he made the calls, he realized that Terrell had outmaneuvered them. By threatening Blake, he had created a situation where legal protection might not be enough. Simone had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. He's going after Blake now. Jonathan, I have to go with him. It's the only way to keep all of us safe. Absolutely not. We're not negotiating with terrorists, which is basically what he is. Then what do we do? He's not going to just give up and go away. Jonathan looked at the woman he loved, at the sleeping children in the next room, and made a decision that would change all their lives. We end this, once and for all. How far would you go to protect the people you love? The final confrontation is coming next. Don't miss how this story of courage and love concludes. Subscribe now and tell us in the comments. What would you do in Jonathan's position? Friday came sooner than anyone wanted. Jonathan had spent the week coordinating with his security team, local police, and a specialized firm that dealt with domestic violence situations. The plan was complex but necessary. They were going to draw Terrell out into a controlled confrontation where he could be arrested with sufficient evidence. The meeting location was a neutral restaurant downtown, chosen specifically for its security cameras and public visibility. Jonathan would go in first, followed by Simone. Undercover officers would be positioned throughout the restaurant, and everything would be recorded. "I'm scared," Simone admitted as they prepared to leave Jonathan's penthouse. Blake and Amara were safely with Jennifer's family, protected by additional security. "I'm scared too," Jonathan said honestly. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if we keep running." "Simone, you found your voice again. Today we're going to use it to end this once and for all." They had rehearsed what would happen. Simone would clearly state that she wanted no contact with Terrell, that she was speaking of her own free will, and that his threats against her and Amara needed to stop. If he made any threatening statements in response, the police would move in immediately. The restaurant was busy with lunch crowd, which provided perfect cover for the operation. Jonathan took a table near the window, while Simone waited in the car with two plainclothes officers. At exactly 1 p.m. Terrell walked in. He was tall and muscular, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the predatory way he moved through the space. He spotted Jonathan immediately and walked over with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the power. "Mr. Preston. Thank you for being reasonable. I'm here to listen to what you have to say," Jonathan replied carefully. Terrell sat down across from him. "What I have to say is simple. You're going to call Simone and tell her to come home with me today. You're going to stop interfering in my family, and you're going to forget you ever met them." "And if I don't?" Terrell leaned forward slightly. "Then your son learns what happens when people don't respect other people's property." "Simone isn't property. She's a human being with the right to make her own choices. Simone is the mother of my child, and she owes me respect and obedience. She also owes me 3 years of my daughter's life that she stole from me. You're the one who threatened them. You're the one who forced her to hide." Terrell's expression darkened. "She told you that? She's lying." Simone always was good at playing the victim when she didn't get her way. This was Jonathan's cue. He signaled to the officers and Simone walked into the restaurant. The change in Terrell when he saw her was immediate and chilling. His entire demeanor shifted from controlled menace to possessive fury. "There's my girl," he said, standing up. "Come here, Simone. We're going home." Simone walked to the table but remained standing, her posture straight and her voice clear when she spoke. "I'm not your girl, Terrell. I'm not going anywhere with you." The shock on his face was almost comical. He clearly hadn't expected to hear her voice after 3 years of silence. "You're talking now? After everything I taught you about keeping your mouth shut? You didn't teach me anything except fear. But I'm not afraid anymore." Terrell's voice rose slightly, causing other diners to glance over. "You belong to me. You and Amara both. I don't know what this rich boy has told you, but you're coming home today. I belong to myself. Amara belongs to herself. We are not your possessions and we will never live with you again. You think you have a choice?" Terrell reached across the table toward her, but Simone stepped back. "Yes, I do have a choice. And I choose to speak up. I choose to say that you threatened me and my daughter. I choose to say that you stalked us, intimidated us, and tried to control us through fear. You better watch your mouth." "No. I'm done watching my mouth. I'm done being silent. I'm done being afraid of you." Terrell stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. Several people in the restaurant were openly watching now. "You're making a mistake, Simone. Big mistake. You think this man can protect you? You think the police can protect you? I know where you live. I know where the kid goes to school. I know where you work. There's nowhere you can hide from me. I'm not hiding anymore. And yes, I do think Jonathan can protect us. I think the police can protect us. I think there are good people in the world who don't believe that men own women like objects." Terrell's control finally snapped completely. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I did for you, everything I gave you, you think you can just walk away and take my daughter? I'll kill you first. I'll kill all of you." The threat was clear, public, and recorded. Within seconds, 3 plainclothes officers surrounded the table, badges visible. "Terrell Jackson, you're under arrest for making terroristic threats, stalking, and criminal intimidation." As they handcuffed him, Terrell's eyes never left Simone's face. "This isn't over. You know it's not over." But Simone stood her ground, her voice steady and strong. "Yes, it is over. I found my voice again and I'm never going to be silent again. 6 months later, Jonathan and Simone's wedding was a small, intimate affair held in Jonathan's penthouse. Blake served as ring bearer while Amara was the flower girl, both children beaming with joy at officially becoming siblings. Terrell had been sentenced to 5 years in prison on multiple charges, with a permanent restraining order that would extend well beyond his release date. The evidence from the restaurant, combined with testimony about his past threats, had been overwhelming. But the real victory wasn't legal, it was personal. As Simone stood at the altar, speaking her wedding vows in a voice that was confident and clear, Jonathan marveled at the transformation. The woman who had once communicated only through whispered notes was now speaking eloquently about love, trust, and the courage it takes to build a family. "Jonathan," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room, "you helped me find my voice when I thought it was lost forever. You showed me that silence isn't always safety, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is speak up for the people we love. I promise to use my voice to build you up, to support our children, and to face whatever challenges come our way together." Blake and Amara giggled during the kiss, and as the small group of family and friends applauded, Jonathan realized that they had built something beautiful from broken pieces. During the reception, Simone gave a short speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "3 years ago, I thought the only way to protect my daughter was to become invisible, to stop speaking, to disappear into silence. I was wrong. The real protection came from finding people who valued my voice, who encouraged me to speak up, and who stood with me when I finally found the courage to say, 'Enough.'" She looked at Blake and Amara, who were playing together in the corner. "Our children will grow up knowing that their voices matter, that they deserve to be heard, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak up for what's right." As the evening wound down and they tucked both children into bed in Blake's room, which had been expanded and redecorated to accommodate Amara's things, Jonathan reflected on how much their lives had changed. "No regrets?" he asked Simone as they stood in the doorway watching their sleeping children. "Only that it took me so long to trust that good things could happen," she replied. "But maybe I needed to go through the silence to truly appreciate having my voice back." "What will you do with that voice now?" Simone smiled, thinking about the domestic violence advocacy work she had already begun, speaking to other women who were trapped in situations similar to what she had endured. "I'm going to use it to help other people find theirs. I'm going to speak up for people who can't speak for themselves yet. And I'm going to make sure our children always know they can come to us with anything, that their voices will always be heard and valued in this house." As they settled into bed that night, Mr. and Mrs. Preston, Jonathan marveled at the journey that had brought them together. A chance encounter during a late night at the office had led to shadow puppets, pizza dinners, and eventually to a love story that had overcome fear, threats, and years of silence. "I love you, Mrs. Preston," he said in the darkness. "I love you too," Simone replied, her voice strong and sure. "And I'm never going to stop saying it." Outside their window, Chicago sparkled in the night, full of possibilities and new beginnings. And in their penthouse, a family slept peacefully, safe in the knowledge that their voices mattered, that they were loved unconditionally, and that together they could face anything the future might bring. The silence was broken. The healing had begun. And love, as it always does when given the chance, had found a way to triumph.